And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south. Also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. So the king of the north shall come and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities. And the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed.
In our previous video, we saw that the king of the south, Grecian pharaoh Ptolemy Philopator, literally drunk himself into an early grave at age 40. His 4-year-old son, Ptolemy Epiphanes, ruled in his stead. The king of the north, Antiochus Magnus, seized on the opportunity to attack Egypt while it was being ruled, albeit in principle, by a 4-year-old boy. Verse 14, the robbers or breakers of Daniel's people is being introduced. Bishop and historian, Thomas Newton, states that far away on the banks of the Tiber, a kingdom had been nourishing itself with ambitious projects and dark designs. Small and weak at first, it grew with marvelous rapidity and strength and vigor. The Tiber is the third longest river in Italy. Revelation 17 verse 9, the 7 hills are 7 mountains on which the horse sits. East of the Tiber River are 7 hills, Aventine Hill and others, on which ancient Rome was built. Rome had varied forms of governance, kingly, consular and so on, but existed in relative obscurity until Antiochus attempted an overthrow of Egypt. Revisiting Daniel 11 verse 14, the Romans interfered in behalf of the young king of Egypt, and determined that he should be protected from the ruin devised by Antiochus and Philip of Macedon. During the reign of Ptolemy Philopator, the boy Pharaoh's father, Philip of Macedon made allegiance with the king of the north, Antiochus Magnus of Syria. When Philopator died, no sooner had his infant son been appointed heir, Antiochus and Philip made a criminal alliance, planning to capture Egypt and divide the territory. They surmised that if they captured Egypt, Philip was to have southern Turkey, Libya, and Egypt, and Antiochus will have all the rest, including Palestine. Rome sided with the boy Pharaoh, and the Greco-Macedonian attack failed. Verse 15, the king of the north will return, take the most fenced cities and the arms of the south, even the best of its armies will fail. Circa 203 BC, the Roman Senate entrusted the education of the boy Pharaoh to Aristomenes of Elysia. His first task was to teach the young Pharaoh the stratagem to be used in warding off an invasion by the 2 confederate kings, Antiochus and Philip. To this end, Aristomenes dispatched Scopas, a famous general of Aetolia, then in the service of the Egyptians, into his native country to raise reinforcements for the army. And while Antiochus battled Attalus in Turkey, Scopas demolished Judea and made it an Egyptian province. Circa 200 BC, Antiochus broke off fighting in Turkey, and defeated Scopas in the Battle of Panion near the sources of the Jordan River. Scopas retreated to Lebanon. Scopas was being besieged by the king of the north, and 3 of Egypt's strongest generals went to support him. They failed miserably. Antiochus, king of the north, forced their surrender, stripped them naked and sent them home. Verse 16, but he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him. Egypt failed to withstand Antiochus, the king of the north, but the north will not be able to resist the Romans. No kingdoms were able to resist this rising power. Syria would eventually be conquered, and added to the Roman Empire, when Pompey, in 65 BC, deposed Antiochus Asiaticus and made Syria a Roman province. The text continues to say, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. Rome became connected to the Jews by an alliance in 162 BC. It did not conquer Judea until 63 BC, and it did so in the following manner. On Pompey's return from his expedition against Mithridates, king of Pontus, Turkey, two competitors, Hyrcanus of the Maccabees and Aristobulus of the Sadducees, were struggling for the crown of Judea. Their cause came before Pompey, who soon perceived the injustice of the claims of Aristobulus. Pompey initially decided to defer his ruling until after his trip to Arabia. Aristobulus perceived that Pompey's face was against him, hurried back to Jerusalem to prepare for Pompey's invasion. Pompey followed and overtook Aristobulus at Jerusalem. Aristobulus promised to give Pompey large sums of money, but it was a con. When Pompey's lieutenant general arrived at Jerusalem, he found the gates of Jerusalem shut. The Maccabees, Aristobulus' enemies, gave Pompey's forces access to Jerusalem. And in 63 BC, after Pompey's victory in the Third Mithridatic War, Pompey besieged Jerusalem and conquered it. He slaughtered 12,000 Jews, entered the temple's most holy compartment and defiled it. Pompey demolished the walls of Jerusalem and returned to Rome with Aristobulus as his prisoner. Verse 17, he shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom. Another rendering of this phrase is, he shall enter the whole kingdom by force. As stated before, Rome conquered Syria in 65 BC. Previously, in 168 BC, Rome conquered Macedon in the Battle of Pydna, and in 135 BC, it defeated Thrace. Now all that remained of Alexander the Great's old empire, not brought under Roman subjection, was Egypt. Egyptian alliances with Rome are about to end. Rome is about to enter Egypt by force. 51 BC, Grecian pharaoh, Ptolemy Auletes is dead. He left the kingdom of Egypt to his eldest son and daughter, Ptolemy XIII and Cleopatra VII. In his will, he stated that brother and sister should marry, and rule jointly. But because they were still very young, Rome appointed Pompey as the guardian of the young rulers of Egypt. 48 BC, in the Battle of Pharsalus, war broke out between Pompey and Julius Caesar. Pompey, being defeated, fled to Egypt. Caesar immediately followed him, but before his arrival, Pompey was basically murdered by Ptolemy, his ward. Julius Caesar assumed the role of the guardian of Ptolemy and Cleopatra. When Caesar arrived in Egypt, he found the country in turmoil. Ptolemy and Cleopatra became hostile to each other, as Cleopatra wasn't given her share in the government. Caesar ordered that Ptolemy and Cleopatra disband their armies, and appear before him to settle their differences. Cleopatra, being of the baser sort, contrived a plan to use her femininity to gain an advantage in the dispute. Laying herself at full length in a bundle of clothes, Apollodorus, her Sicilian servant, wrapped her up in a cloth and carried Cleopatra on his shoulders. When Apollodorus arrived at the citadel, he claimed that the bundle on his shoulders was a gift to the Caesar, gained access to his presence and deposited Cleopatra at his feet. When Caesar saw Cleopatra's nakedness, he was smitten. Caesar ruled that both Cleopatra and her brother, Ptolemy, should occupy the throne jointly. Pothinus, the chief minister of state, having previously consorted with Ptolemy to expel Cleopatra from Egypt, fearing Cleopatra's wrath, organized an insurrection of 20,000 men, in attempt to drive Julius Caesar from Alexandria. Caesar easily dispatched the rebellion. The Egyptians attacked Caesar once more, wherein Caesar sent for reinforcements in Turkey. Mithridates set out for Egypt with an army raised in Syria and Cilicia. Antipater the Idumean joined him with 3,000 Jews. The Jews, who held passes into Egypt, permitted the army to pass on without interruption. Without the Jews' assistance, the incursion would have failed. Caesar subdued Egypt in 47 BC. Verse 17 continues, the daughter of women, corrupting her. Caesar had a son with Cleopatra, and historians posit that this was the reason that Caesar led an incursion into Egypt. He stayed in Egypt longer than he should, and it weakened his position in the Roman Empire. The verse continues, she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. Cleopatra married and had 3 children with Mark Antony, Augustus's enemy. At this juncture, Rome had a triumvirate, three-ruler, form of government. 31 BC, Augustus defeated Antony in the Battle of Actium. He and Cleopatra committed suicide when Augustus invaded Egypt. Verse 19, Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. Julius Caesar, after defeating Pharnaces II, king of Pontus in Turkey, also defeated the remnants of Pompey's forces in Africa. He returned home to Rome and was made a perpetual dictator, but prophecy dictated that he would fall. Julius Caesar won 500 battles, killed 1,121,200 men, but he didn't fall in battle. Julius Caesar died in his seat in the Senate chamber. Cassius, Brutus, and other conspirators stabbed Julius Caesar 23 times and he died. Thus in 44 BC, Julius Caesar stumbled, and fell, and was not found.